Hey team, it's Jen here. I am coming to you at the top of week 3, and our courses, they're getting going, they're getting heated up, and I'm really pleased to see that in almost all of our courses so far, students are really showing a high level of engagement and investment. So this week's overview, I wanted to focus on 3 primary topics. The first topic is some commenting tips. Tips that can help you to give students the kind of assessment on their work that's going to foster evolution in their writing throughout the term. The second topic that I want to talk about is one that I have actually been emailed about by a couple instructors this term so far, and that is some tips about how we can help to better engage our students in the discussion boards. And the third topic that I want to briefly touch on is just what are my expectations about your weekly announcements in your courses? So let's get started. The first topic is commenting. And the first point that I want to make about commenting, what is strong commenting versus what is more passive commenting, is I think that it's important to distinguish between offering comments on content versus commenting through editing, making comments on, linguistic choice, grammar, cohesion, things like this. I think that both aspects of commenting are very important. So especially for our graduate students, they have to know if they're writing in fragments or if their cohesion is monstrous or, things like that. Of course, those things are very important. But when I look at your grading, and I noticed that perhaps you are giving students 100% of comments on editing and 0% on content, or even 50% on editing and 50% on content. I kind of raise an eyebrow and I say, I don't think that that's probably as fruitful a way of grading as we would want it to be. Giving students feedback on the content of their essay is a very important thing, especially for graduate students, but also for undergraduate students. It's very integral that you are able to give students a sense of how they can propel their line of inquiry, how they can strengthen it, by giving them some suggestions and pointing out places where they could have, for example, added more evidence to their argument or provided a sense of counter argument here or acknowledged the stakes of their argument or moved on to a related context, things like this. So in your commenting, as we start getting ready to grade some of our first papers in the course, I want you to think about how important it is to make your comments centered on content, especially in the beginning of the term. I know that as a grader myself, I do my most rigorous grading on student work in the first 2 deliverables, the first 2 big papers, response papers. I let students know that my grading of their work, it changes throughout the term. I say, your first 2 big deliverables on writing, those are graded very meticulously by me. I go into great detail. I offer marginal comments, end comments, and voice comments and Turnitin for them. I expect that they all go back and they all read my comments. If I see that a student has not yet considered my comments in Turnitin, then I refuse to read their next deliverable until they have done so. So you can go into the Turnitin platform and you can see which students have and have not yet access to your comments. I make it a requirement that students read my comments because without really considering the criticisms of their work, I do believe that students are not going to be able to grow as writers. So that's very integral. So do consider how you're going to work in your comments into the framework of your course. I think commenting is really a great way for students to grow. We can continue a discussion about commenting tips and strategies in the discussion forum. So if you have questions, feel free to just be transparent about that and post your questions in the forums. Moving on to the second article for discussion today, how can we better engage our students in the discussion forum? Now, there are a lot of things to talk about with this. Of course, everybody has approaches that work for them. The first tip that I would give you if you find yourself struggling in the discussion forum, perhaps you've taught the course before and you've never had a problem with discussion, but something about this class or this mix of students seems to really produce a kind of stagnant environment, or perhaps you're a first-time instructor with the course and you feel unsure about where to go. The first thing to keep in mind is that you always want to motivate students in a way that feels genuine for you. So we all come to the course with our own personas, our own teaching personalities, and it's important in our own pedagogies, of course, and it's important that you foster discussion and engagement in a way that feels good for you. I think a lot of times finding out what feels right for you takes some trial and error and a little bit of experimentation. And the discussion forum is a great place to experiment because that's exactly what students are doing in the forums. They're experimenting with their tone, they're experimenting with their ideas and their argumentation, and they're practicing the key moves of academic writing. And you are too. You're practicing the key moves of student engagement and fostering critical thinking. Your comments in the discussion forum should always foster critical thinking. That is their function. So you have to ask yourself the primary question, how do I personally foster critical thinking? For me personally, I can speak to only my specific approach. I like to push the envelope. I always challenge students' ideas. I oftentimes will argue the opposite. I'll bring in kind of outlandish observations that might not generally be considered. And I make every discussion controversial because for me, the backbone of academic writing is controversy. We want to stir people up. We want to make them uncomfortable. We want to shine light in the dark crevices that aren't perhaps illuminated as much as they ought to be. And we also want to encourage students to read and understand text according to their personal experiences. So that's what I interrogate. I'm after that like a fox in the discussion forums. I'm very aggressive. The second tip that I could give you is to be the kind of presence in the forums that you want to see from your students. So students are going to look to you to set the tone, to show the caliber of work that's done. And if you're a slack ass in your discussion forum and you're only popping in to make, 3 responses after you've already graded the forum, and your comments are like, hey, Jane, great idea. Yeah, I can see your point. And that's it. Students are going to be like, oh, that's what we're doing in the forum. We're just acknowledging points and we're moving forward and we're saying, hey, good job, and that's it. That's not what a discussion forum ought to do, and it's not what it can do if you want to see students really engaging and really getting dirty in the forums. You need to get dirty and you need to engage and you need to show them exactly what pushing the envelope looks like. So those are my 2 tips. There are many more tips that we could certainly bring to the table, and I encourage us to continue this discussion in our forums and our team shell. The final point that I want to make is announcements. You want to be sure that every week, at the very beginning of the week, or maybe at the end of the previous week, you are posting announcements for the week that's coming up. Many students do use these weekly announcements, these weekly overviews, as a way to gauge their work for the week, their approach. I always make a video, but you don't have to do that. You can just write something out in which I let students know some key tips I have for them for getting through the week. So for example, if we have a group workshop deliverable, I let them know the stakes of that workshop. I let them know some key approaches that they can use to really succeed. If they have a lot of research to do during the week, I give them some quick researching tips. So I always begin the week by giving them tips for success. I also always provide a transition between modules, letting them know how the modules reflect on what came before and how the module looks forward to what's coming up. That way they have a sense of cohesion in the course, which I think is really important. Otherwise, deliverables and readings can seem like they're floating in air. And that can really bring a feeling of discomfort and confusion to students. So I am looking every week for your announcements. I want to see that you're being personable and that your announcements are student-centered and that you're really trying to show that you care about their success in your course. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I hope that you will come to my online office hours on Skype anytime if you want to just chit chat, if you want to talk about what's going on in your class, if you want to talk about some alternative approaches, some things that are going really well. The sky is the limit. You guys have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.